If you're thinking about rebranding your career, then you don't need to start from scratch. You can step into the next chapter of your career with confidence and credibility, working with what you already have. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. My first tip for rebranding your career is to pull on a thread or to pull on multiple threads in your career. I first heard someone use this phrase really well when I was in a workshop, and it was something that the facilitator said to someone that was presenting a comment in the workshop that we were in. And it really stood out to me because immediately this reference to pulling on a thread was able to cut through all of the noise of the rest of the conversation and zoom in on what he thought was most important in that conversation. And it allowed the person speaking to really hone in into that particular argument. So that is what I want you to think about when it comes to your own career. Your career, for example, is this rich tapestry of your roles, your experiences, the projects that you have worked on, the skills that you have been able to develop. And over time, this can start to get more and more complicated. It can have more and more to it. It can have more clutter involved as a part of it as well. So what I want you to think about is how you can pull on the threads that are most relevant to where you want to go going forward, because your career rebrand does not need to be a reinvention. You likely already have all of the necessary skills to be able to pivot your professional brand in a certain direction. It's just a matter of zooming in on what those things are and pulling on those threads that are most relevant to the direction that you want to go in. For example, if you have a particular really broad skill set, how are you honing in on the ones that are most transferable to where you want to go in your career going forward? And this leads nicely into tip number 2, which is to connect your narrative. This was something that really stood out to me when I read Dory Clark's book, Reinventing You, where in that book it is highlighted that your reputation, your skills, your experience follows you no matter where you go in your career. So you don't need to start from scratch. You simply can remember that you can take those things with you. But what is it that you are taking with you? So when you are positioning your rebrand, make sure that you connect that narrative for your audience. Do the heavy mental lifting for them to explain to them why your particular career change is not this complete 180 in what you have been doing, but actually feels like the natural next step in your progression. So in my own career, I had worked in marketing and communications management, for example, for over a decade. So when I wanted to move into personal brand coaching, I wasn't actually starting from scratch. I was pulling on the threads that already existed in my career experience. For example, I was honing in on the aspect of branding that I had always done as a part of my marketing and communication roles. I was honing in on the personal branding that I had done as a part of those roles for, say, senior executives, for example, or personalities that were in the public space. So when it comes to your own career, consider the broader experience that you have had and think about the skills that are most relevant, that are going to help you connect that narrative and how you can bring that narrative together. So in my own case, for example, I might decide that I want to more succinctly package my career pivot as going from selling brands to selling people, for example. So you might be able to find a way that you can explain your career transition in the way that you communicate your career history and how you can package that up. It doesn't necessarily need to always be that succinct. That's just an example, but decide how you are connecting the narrative between what you were doing and what you are doing now, or what you want to do going forward. And this leads into tip number 3, which is to package your related skills. So it's not enough to simply just connect your narrative in, say, your value proposition or in the bio bio of your LinkedIn profile. You need to be much more specific about how you are connecting the transferable skills of the roles that you have done into the roles that you want to have going forward, or the opportunities that you want to have going forward. So this is where you take all of that rich career history that you have had in individual roles and you zoom in on what is most relevant. You do a little bit of ruthless editing with taking out some of the things that are no longer relevant to what it is that you want to do going forward, so that the things that are most relevant start to really pop on the page for the person that you are trying to win over as your next potential employer or as your next client, and tell them explicitly how your skills that you have had in the past connect to what it is that you do now. So in my case, for example, what qualifies me to talk about personal branding? That is because I have had those roles in marketing and communication management, in sports, entertainment, in education, and in retail sectors as well. And I have been behind the scenes working on well-known brands and leaders in those spaces too. What, for example, qualifies me to talk about digital content? That is because I was leading the teams in those areas as well. What, for example, qualifies me to talk about writing? That is because I have been writing professionally for over 15 years. I have been the editor of magazines that were distributed to tens of thousands of people. What, for example, qualifies me to talk about coaching? And that is, for example, the relevant qualifications that I have in this space, including having done an MBA and also moved up to be president of my MBA alumni network. The leadership development space and working really closely with CEOs as I have throughout my career is something that I have always been really actively involved in, and I transfer those skills and my own management experience into my personal brand coaching. But the point is to do all of this for your own experience that you have had. So really go through and ask yourself, what is it that I am trying to achieve in my career? What are the skills that I need to be successful in this next stage of my career? And how does what I have already done relate to that? So you're doing this audit on your own career to make sure that you are doing that heavy mental lifting for the reader, for the audience that you are trying to connect with, to connect your career experience with what actually gives you credibility in the new space that you are trying to move into. And my tip number 4 is to shift your storytelling. And by this, I don't just mean the stories that you tell in your career branding documents like your resume, your cover letter, or how you communicate on your LinkedIn profile. By shifting your storytelling, I mean the ongoing storytelling that you are communicating to the marketplace, and more specifically, the content that you are creating. Or if you do things offline as well, like speaking, for example, how you are shifting into other areas to focus your messages in a particular direction. If you have, for example, been known for a particularly broad industry, like I was for marketing and communications, you might be used to talking to those topics. But if you want to pivot your career in a different direction, that is where you need to think about the things that we have talked about today in terms of what you want to zoom in on in your experience, in your career history, and talk about those things more. So, for example, if I wanted to move into personal branding, but I was still working in marketing and communications, I might start to engage more with content related to personal branding. So before you feel more comfortable in actually sharing content that you have originally created, you can start with this smaller step. You can start to just engage in that content more. And on LinkedIn, this is going to likely show up on other people's feeds as well. They can start to see that you are engaging in a particular area and you are interested in a particular field. Then you might move into sharing other people's content on your LinkedIn profile. So instead of just engaging with the content that you find interesting in a particular space, you start to more actively share that. You're endorsing a particular perspective. You're showing more that you are actively involved in a particular industry or a particular space. You're starting a conversation conversation in a particular area of interest. And then once you feel a little bit more comfortable, you might start to create more content related to this space. You might start to create original content. You might create long form content, which I am a big advocate for because this shows the depth of your expertise in a particular area. For example, you might start to publish articles on LinkedIn. You might start to create videos. You might start your own YouTube channel or podcast, showing that you have the credibility, the interest, the expertise related to this field that you want to move more and more into. And this was something that also stood out to me when I read Reinventing You, because it highlighted that, for example, an art student is expected to have a portfolio ready to be able to show potential employers or clients the value of their skill set and what their capabilities are. But it's not really that much different in the business world, and more this is becoming more relevant. What is the portfolio that you have to be able to prove your credibility? This is something that I believe that content creation does, is that it acts as your portfolio of proof for the industry that you want to make an impact in, for the perspective that you bring to the marketplace. So how are you shifting your storytelling to also shift with your career goals? So remember that your career rebrand does not need to be about abandoning your career history, but building on it. Thanks so much. Subscribe for more on personal branding, and I'll see you in the next episode.